As I've said before in previous installments of this series, we are in the throes of the biggest change management exercise in the history of our economy. We've literally deconstructed systems that took us years to erect, seemingly overnight. As we begin the process of returning our employees to a physical work environment, we will have to manage change with the same level of rigor and intention as we did when we sent our employees home. Many of you are thinking right now, how do I return our employees back to work safely, but also in a way that promotes productivity while serving our customers? So today, we will think through some of the nuances of this complex topic. In case you're unfamiliar with us, Optimize is a management consulting firm specializing in strategic planning. We've helped over 140 companies craft their business strategies. We work with mid-management teams to help them decide what to do next. A little later in this broadcast, I'll spend just a few minutes sharing some perspective on how teams may change as we gradually return our employees back to work. Today, to help us reimagine the office environment is one of the nation's leading experts on the topic, who just happens to be an Optimize client. It's my pleasure to introduce Steve Lang, CEO of Danker, based in Somerville, New Jersey. Danker provides spaces that help engage, define culture, and drive performance. Danker works with 100 partners, including Steelcase, for whom they are the premier partner in New Jersey, Washington, and Baltimore. Steve, welcome to the Optimize webinar series.
Thank you, Mark, and good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. So we are several weeks into this great social distancing experiment due to the pandemic, and clearly there are a number of questions and a fair amount of uncertainty, and as we're all aware, it changes weekly, sometimes even daily. At Danker, we're interested in knowing what our clients think and collaborating with them to share ideas and plan for what comes next. I've spent the last several weeks in a series of meetings, small meetings with our clients, and I'll do my best to share with you today some of the things that those folks are thinking about as we all help each other come back and prepare for the challenges we're all going to face as we begin to bring everybody back to the workforce. So just a little context on Danker. These are the places that we play, and we do so with we're fortunate to have most of the major Fortune 500 companies as our clients. We work in a wide array of industries, and we provide specification, design, space planning, project management, and all of the facility management services. The company's been in business since 1829, and we've evolved quite a bit since then. And most of our clients, our direct clients, are either facilities, engineering folks, HR, or corporate real estate executives. So as we navigate this time of uncertainty, we start to think about people returning to work. And our job at Danker is to cut through all that noise and think about our individuals within our firms, our companies, and our communities. And they're looking to us for guidance and direction. We live in this space every day. And I know that there's a tremendous amount of noise and anxiety about bringing people back to work, where, when, how we're going to do that. We've created a little bit of a construct to help everyone think about this a little bit deeper. And the construct is not one that we created, but it's really adopted from Abraham Maslow's research on the hierarchy of needs. Many of you may be familiar with this. And we put it inside the context of work and space. Traditionally, if you think about where, as leaders of companies, we want to spend our time, it's on the accomplishments and the aspirational goals of the organization and its people. It's about thinking about the built environment, about a way to attract and retain, and to create an environment where collaboration is at its best so that the organization can do some of its best work. The problem is that right now, as everyone heads back to work post-pandemic or living through the pandemic, the real focus for our organizations needs to fall all the way back to the bottom of this pyramid, which is on the subjects of health and wellness and safety and security. Employees are going to be way more concerned about their own shelter and health and security more than they've ever been. And if we as organizations don't solve for that, we're never going to be able to get back to some of the relationships, teamwork, accomplishments, and aspirational goals that we set for the organizations that we lead. So with that in mind, there are really kind of three sections that I want to spend some time talking about. One is on this subject of restore. How do we prepare your teams and the facilities, the actual real estate that your teams are going to work in or come back to work in, to meet some new standards and protocols in a post-pandemic environment? Next, how do we build back the way that we've created spaces that allow people to engage and allow customers to join and be part of our building? And then finally, in the recovery, how do we transform? What does the new normal actually look like? There are a lot of guidelines as we think about this: restore, return, and recover. OSHA.gov, CDC.gov have some really good expert opinions. And if you want to do a little bit more homework on what those specifics are, those two websites are a good place to start. So rethinking the workplace really starts with three components. And we're going to look at this in these three components. What do we need to do right now? And when I say right now, in the next several weeks as people migrate back to the office, what do we need to think about in the near term? The near term could be 6 months to 2 years. Let's put that time frame or that construct to it. And then the far is really the next 2 to 5 years. What is it going to look like, and how will spaces and the workplace be reinvented? So if we look at now and we look at some of the simple things we can do, a lot of our clients are talking to us about, how do I retrofit my space immediately? I need some simple short-term solutions for retrofit. We've provided in this document here a partial list of thought starters. And again, we're solving for the basic fundamental needs of safety and security. If you think that there are times on a Friday afternoon when your employees may not be as productive as they could be because they're thinking about the weekend, watch how unproductive your staff is as they migrate back to work if you don't solve for their current very basic needs of health and safety and security. So in this regard, there's some simple things, and I just put up a bunch of different photos to brainstorm and have you think about it. But whether you're in a factory environment, an office environment, we're seeing a lot of, and requests for clients, we're seeing a lot of just very simple glass screens or plexiglass screens. There's some infrared body scanners that we're starting to learn about. The factory work, obviously some people are back in a current COVID environment in the factory, and they're doing some things in terms of social separation. I am not a manufacturer. I don't study the process of manufacturing. Most of my work and our work as a firm is in the white collar office space. So that's where I'm going to spend a fair amount of time today. Some other simple solutions: mobile screens, user configurability. A big trend right now is, how do I get the individual users the comfort they need? And how do they augment the space as they come back themselves? I don't want to have to call my facilities people or my vendor to come in and move all this stuff around. It's complex, it's challenging. Simple screens, we're getting all kinds of requests from facilities people for just simple divisions of space. If we take a look at the workstations, there's several ways we can retrofit anyone's workstation, and they're really very basic. Again, I'm just providing some insights here for things that you could do immediately, some simple screens and a few other examples. You know, people are starting to ask the question, you know, the benching or the open plan, is that going away? And I think what you're going to find in that, you know, sort of strategic longer term planning, that, you know, benching as it stands and as a way to consolidate the workforce and use less real estate is something that's going to be a thought of the past. Having people work that closely on an ongoing basis without proper division of space is not going to be something, I think, that has the long-term effects. Also, in trying to solve for needs, when I think about this space, some of it is the perception of cleanliness, the perception of division, the perception of privacy, you know, even breathing privacy. And so we have to plan for the perception as much as we have to plan for the reality. Just some other examples, starting to look at things like, you know, do we go back to the cubicle? I'm not sure that that's the right solution. The cubicle of the 80s and 90s is very heavy. It's tough to dismantle. It's not easily configurable. It's more permanent. Here, I think in the pictures you're seeing examples of, mobile pedestals, flat screen monitors. Change in any environment, post-COVID or prior, recent prior, change is a constant in the office space. And I like to think of the commercial real estate space that we all live in as kind of the best supporting actor to your business. And if the space is planned in a way that's mindful, and now mindful through the lens of a COVID crisis, it allows you to perform at your best. And that's where we spend our time. So again, near term, visual communication clues. So how do we divide space? How do we put signage on the floor or do things with literally carpet tiles to redefine that 6-foot distancing need? Walls and vertical surfaces become a way to provide your employees clues for wayfinding and some of the new social norms that you're going to need them to behave in a way in the office. Things like foot pattern and trafficking and reminders about what they touch, and how they move throughout the space. These are all in the very now things that you'll find yourself dealing with, or that your facilities or office folks that manage this for you are dealing with on a regular basis. Starting to talk about light sensors that detect motion, voice-activated technology, clearly improved cleaning protocols. And I had one client tell me the other day that what was really important was not only that they were cleaning, but that they had the perception of cleaning in the office during the day. So they were changing their cleaning protocol to happen during the day rather than at night, just to leave the employees with the understanding that in fact their offices were being cleaned on a regular basis. So if I look at the near, kind of moving off the now in the near, that next 6 to 12 months, perhaps 2 years, how do we retrofit? How do we think or rethink the density of that 6-foot distancing environment? Can we still collaborate and support collaboration in teams? And how do we orient folks differently in a geometrical way to start planning accordingly? And so this gets a little bit more intensive about how we might think about specific workstations and some of the space division and privacy screens that we could put back up. I'm noticing some requests for a lot of glass and plexiglass toppers on top of some of those, let's call them panel-based systems. Again, gives the division of space and some level of clean and privacy and airflow, but doesn't conflict or constrict the view. We want to bring natural light into the space as much as we can. When I look at it on a real estate footprint, and just to give you a quick example, this is a very, very busy slide, and I'm not going to walk you through it all, but what I'm hearing and talking to clients about and what our folks are dealing with is how do we continue to divide space and use the natural elements of the building? We need to decrease density, clearly. We need to improve the sanitation stations, much like there was a coffee station or a small cafe on a floor in a certain area. There will be sanitation stations throughout the building. Boundary screens, wayfinding, floor markings, as I mentioned earlier, individual seating and lounge spaces. We're moving away from, just before this pandemic, there was a huge move in the office space to go to more, I'll call it residential furniture, a place where people could be a little more collaborative and more of a relaxed setting. I think you're going to see a pullback in our industry from that. And where there is more residential, it's going to be individual seating as opposed to group seating. Adjusting the orientation of how people are actually laid out and the space is laid out, really important. And then the last thing is video conferencing. One of the things that I'm finding is that no one is going to bring everyone back to work immediately. There will be a migration of different groups within different departments, and there very may well be the new normal that 75 to 80% of the staff will be in the office, and 25 to 20% of the staff may always be working remote, and we just rotate around who that becomes. Or who's
Hey, Steve.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So I'm thinking of at least one of our clients is on the line today, and in their office, they have a large cafeteria in the middle of their office and kind of this configuration going around the cafeteria. And I'm just curious if employers are going to have more room for spacing around desks and cubes or whatever, do you think that there's things that they might sacrifice that they had before?
Yeah, I think you're going to get those collaborative spaces and those cafe spaces. They're going to get sacrificed in the near term. They may get sacrificed in the long term, or because we don't have a full workforce at work all the time in the new normal, maybe they can bring them back, but they're going to be brought back in more of a social distancing appropriate way. So a cafe space may have individual tables and chairs as opposed to group tables and chairs to have your lunch or to have a quick cup of coffee or a sort of a quick standing meeting.
Yeah, because I would imagine arguably those are also easier spaces to reconstruct because they're more casual and more flexible, I would imagine.
Very much so.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. The other thing is video conferencing. You know, we have all become pretty comfortable, and we're using Zoom in this platform today. And you know, there's many others, Microsoft Teams, etc. But if you think about video conferencing, it works when we're all home because we're all on a laptop and we're all in our own private home offices at best. But back in the office, if you're going to collaborate with someone who's working remotely and therefore on a video platform, does the built environment in the office engage in the lab and allow the people to use the video conferencing that's in the building, or is everyone going to walk around at their laptop and be talking to people in their own laptop in their own way in an open environment? It's going to be a little distracting. So I think you're going to see an increased amount of video conferencing and video conferencing spaces so that we can collaborate with those that are not in the office in a meaningful way that ensures the privacy and socializes the ideas without socializing the whole office, if you know what I mean. So here's just a simple example of reorienting two different people, and you know, we spend a lot of time in furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Here's some simple dividers to think about collaborative spaces in an individual way. You know, Mark, you mentioned you know, the work cafe or the cafeteria. Some of these very simple photographs are ways for people to get away from their desk, do some heads down reading or collaborating on their own, not part of a group or part of a work area, but they're, as you can tell, very isolated in how this specific example is laid out. Even in that team room off to the left, you've got individual seating, 6-foot distancing within an enclosed or semi-enclosed area. So this is the new normal, and I think what we're going to start to see, and you know, what our clients are talking to us about. When I think about space through the built environment, I think a lot about separation and less drywall and more architectural, full demountable walls, more movable glass partitions, glass enclosures. It lets an appropriate amount of light in. It is also reconfigurable to a certain extent. Well, certainly more reconfigurable than drywall. It's easier to clean and reconfigure. You can embed technology in those things. So these are, again, some of the new normal. Technology solutions and video conferencing, I mentioned this earlier. You know, it's going to be important, and I'm seeing products like Microsoft Surface Hub. It's a giant digital whiteboard that allows you to collaborate in real time. You know, one of the disadvantages of being on a Zoom platform, even if you're video to video, it's not the same as you would collaborate in a normal environment when you're face to face. And I think many of us are starting to feel, at least this early, or believe it or not, in this early, some Zoom, Microsoft Team fatigue. And I think as we think about video conferencing and annotating, here's some other examples in a more distancing scenario. These are going to need to be part of the built environment in a bigger way so as to accommodate the remote workforce. Technology solutions, room scheduling, and things of that nature, really important, also going to drive some measurement activity. So the picture to the right is a live map. And there's technology out now that allows us to manage the space and the hotspots within the space. You know, think big corporate end user with, you know, millions of square feet of office space. May not be everyone on this call, but our client base is talking to us about how do we measure those pinch points where hot zones could really be an issue and we're not properly accounting for the right social distancing. And so there are sensors, simple sensor technology that measure occupancy and then aggregate that occupancy across the platform, telling us which conference rooms were used and how often, which technology was used in the conference room, and where people convene and don't convene within the space or the global footprint, so that we can come back with the help of the facilities team and rethink, re-augment, reevaluate the space and how effective it is on an ongoing basis. Some of the emerging trends, really three major categories. The acceleration of changes are already happening, and they were happening before this crisis, but these changes caused fear and the immediate crisis of this infectious pandemic. There are also some things that we're learning about this experience, and as we look ahead, there are really four key insights, and it's early, and I mind you again, it's early. We don't have all the answers, but here's what we're learning from clients and some insights we're getting. One, absolutely a focus on renewed well-being. If we don't solve for people's basic needs, we're not going to be able to achieve the results we're trying to achieve as an organization. Second is some of the changes in the built environment, and clearly we've talked about a little bit of those. The digital transformation, how we accommodate in the office those that are working out of the office. What else can be digital in terms of even our own touch, voice activation, things of that nature, and then overall organizational changes and behaviors in the office space. So when I look at well-being, there are really four areas of concern. One, how do we address safety? We talked about that. Make sure that we communicate early and often to the folks in the building and have a plan B and all the way through plan Z. And health and wellness, most important thing. If we don't solve for that, we're not able to get to the rest of the business at hand. Considering the built environment, it's a complex space. There's a lot going on. If you want to be productive again as an organization, if you want to advance your company's cause, if you want to do the great work, the space needs to play a role, and it has a significant impact on your results. You know, as I said earlier, space becomes the best supporting actor. And if it's designed in a way and planned in a way and is mindful of post-pandemic culture, it will again be the best supporting actor for you. 5 work modes, social distancing rules. If we think about the place and the built environment, it really needs to do 5 things. It needs to allow our employees, these are very basic, this is before COVID and it'll have to be after COVID. It allows people to come in and do focused work. There is some socialization that has to happen in an office environment. Obviously, we do training and learning, whether it's online or in classroom or within the building. People still need to collaborate, and we will still collaborate after the the post-COVID world. And to some level, rejuvenation and a little bit of downtime and away time, whether you get outside or to an area that allows you to sort of just capture your thoughts. So transformation, inspiration. I'm looking at the digital transformation world, and I'm reading about, and clients are asking about, what is 3D imaging going to look like? I was reading last night about an article, a company called Argo Design. And they have this artificial window that when you raise your shade, you can see your coworker sitting next to you in a 3D environment. It's kind of like a wormhole. It's not a product that's ready for prime time, but it's something that we're looking at because I think the digital transformation of the office built environment will help manage this crisis. I'm always worried, as many of you probably on this call are, that there'll be another suppression and another lift and another suppression based on how the crisis spreads, and if it does spread again in the fall or in the winter. And so these are things we need to start and continue to think about. And then finally, when I think about organizational transformation, and I know Mark does this for a living, there are really 5 key areas, right? Can we establish a clear vision on how we're going to manage this change? Do we have the right leaders to foster that change? Are they living and breathing the same thoughts and ideas that everyone else is living and breathing? Are they living by and leading by example? Does your organization and is your organization designed for change? Is your space designed to support that change? Do you have an agile management process? How do you support the process with state-of-the-art tools? And that's what we talk about with clients all the time. And with that, I know I went fairly quickly, but I hope everyone stays well and is well, and I'd be happy to help answer any questions or any other thoughts that you may have.
Steve, that's awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to take questions just in about 3 or 4 minutes here. And if you can cede control, I'll ask you maybe to answer this one question as we transition here. So one of the things that's really fascinating about what your company does is, you embed technology into the solutions in your office. You reference some of the ways that companies can measure things from the physical environment. Could you expand upon that a little bit more? Like, what are things that a company can measure in terms of productivity from the tools in their office environment?
So one of the things we're measuring is how much technology is used within the built environment, how often conference rooms are occupied, and at what level of occupancy they currently have. We're helping corporate real estate executives manage the footprint overall. So how much space do I actually need? Is it 200 square foot per person, 400 square feet per person? Those are things that on a footprint, on a global real estate footprint, we work with a lot of clients to do. More importantly, in terms of thinking about productivity, it's one of those areas, I think, in our business that it's a combination of art and science. Does the space, is it properly planned in a way that is conducive to proper collaboration and teaming and work, or is it restrictive? And that's that best supporting actor portion I'm telling you, or I've spoken of. So those things are a little bit softer and more difficult to measure, but space occupancy, and how often space is used and on what level it's used are things that we have actual real data on.
Right. Fantastic. Thank you. All right, so let's switch gears. The one thing that's been remarkable to me over the last few weeks have been that there have been trends that have already been in evidence pre-COVID-19 that have only been amplified during this crisis. Before the pandemic, companies were retooling office space to meet the ever-changing demands of their employees and customers. So as we reemerge from the pandemic, it will not only be our physical environments that will change, but our management systems as well. Pre-COVID-19, we've been reading a lot about clear trends underfoot, such as companies moving to a more agile style of decision-making. And during the crisis, we've seen management teams find a new cadence to their work. Companies have adopted change faster, but not only by utilizing tools such as collaboration software and web conferencing, but also introducing new management practices such as daily huddles and scrums. So now that Steve has kind of set the table in terms of the changes we can expect in our offices, I just wanted to comment briefly about how teams might look a little differently than they did before. So while Agile's been a management discipline that's been pretty popular in Silicon Valley and in software development companies and the like, and in Fortune 1000 companies, I think for many of our mid-market clients, many of which who are on the line today and represent our audience, they're trying to find the right balance between kind of standardized work processes and a world where they have to adapt very quickly. So for some of you, Agile wouldn't work at all. And we believe that many companies will evolve in such a way that they'll take from the best of traditional management approaches and from Agile and transform their organizations in a way that they can make decisions better and faster. So in our strategy and execution practice, what we observe is that many of our clients are great at visioning and goal setting, but they have difficulty managing the work. And I would suggest that is because classical management structure organized in these functional areas such as HR and IT and operations, they provide some constraints. So any system has its strengths and weaknesses, but I would say organizing by function tends to promote like gatekeeping and silos and that type of thing. So in the future, I believe these functional departments like HR and finance will continue to provide the structure that companies need to mitigate risk. If anything, we'll all be a little more conservative coming out of the crisis than we were before. But these departments will provide support on things that I would refer to as level one decision making, right? So those are decisions about infrastructure that take time and are rooted in the expertise within these functional departments. And then there'll be special projects that are supported by dedicated project managers. They may focus on solving one problem at a time. They will support more level two type decisions that are lower risk, such as the development of a new product line or maybe remodeling a factory. So the success of these projects, which are the lifeblood of improvement in many organizations, require contributions from a cross-functional team. So these teams will need to be nimble and they will not be governed by a single function. So they might have an executive sponsor in one of those functions, maybe like a CFO or an HR VP, but more and more companies will have professional project managers who will see these projects through on time and on budget. So I offer this insight today because I believe that the design of the office of the future will have much to do with the management philosophy deployed by the leaders within our companies. I would say that project teams such as product development are more likely to be working remote than say an accounting function or an HR team. So as you imagine the office of the future, I also invite you to consider the management systems of the future, which are more likely to be hybrids, bridging the gap between functional teams and more agility as we try to pivot to manage the pace of change. Speaking of which, if you ever need any help imagining the future of your company, we're here to help. And our next webinar in this series will be entitled The Pivot, How the C-Suite Will Manage Change and Growth in a Post-19 World. And we will be having that 4 weeks from today. So turning things back to Steve. And please, if you have any questions, please enter them into the Q&A bar on your screen. So Steve, we both referenced that in the future, it probably more looks like a hybrid, right? Like marrying the best practices of the past and kind of what we've learned over the last 5 or 6 weeks. You know, if there's one thing that you'd hope that companies would preserve from the prior way of doing things, what would it be?
Yeah, this one's a tough one for me because it conflicts with the current thinking, and it's collaboration. You know, humans are naturally social beings, and we could watch a baseball game on TV, but we go to the stadium. We can watch a concert on TV, but we go to the concert hall, right? I hesitate to think that collaboration will go away, and I believe that organizations do their best work when people collaborate. So how we find a way to work around the current crisis to continue to collaborate is the one thing that I hope doesn't go away, and I believe won't go away, because you know it's hard to go virtual skiing and it's hard to virtually collaborate.
Yeah. So, you know, clearly we're trying to balance employee safety and health with productivity. You know, what are some of the secrets to productivity in the office design that, you know, we need to preserve in addition to the things you've already commented on?
Yeah, you know, noise is a big one. You know, there's sound masking systems, white noise, if you will, seated privacy, visual privacy. Different modes of work require different levels of or different types of space. And so having the appropriate range of settings, and that doesn't mean that everyone has all those settings. It means that all those settings are available. And as we move throughout the day, those settings are available to us on a usage basis. So to me, those are the important things: noise, visual privacy, seated privacy, and the ability for the space to enhance what we do instead of inhibit what we do.
So last week, we had another client as our speaker, the CFO of the Deschutes Brewery, and he explained how in their production environment, they had moved towards like pods. So groups of people working in a pod, maybe 5 or 7. Do you see maybe something like that applying to an office environment in the future?
That's a really good question. I think the answer is yes, but it depends, because one of the things I know about any corporation is that the ideas, the projects expand and contract. And so this idea of cross-functional teams and cross-functional projects, teams and projects convene, especially in an agile environment. You mentioned agile in some of your notes, your comments earlier. In an agile environment, they convene, they get together to solve a problem, and they dismantle only to reconvene in a new form with new people. And I don't think that's going away. I think that is the new normal in how work gets done. I think this crisis has thrown a major wrench into that new normal, but I don't think it stops people from needing to do that work and being agile. I think there will be new inventions and new things, and maybe even things that we carry on our person to keep us distanced away. I know there was something I saw recently where everyone was wearing watches, and those watches beeped or buzzed when you got within 6 feet of somebody in an office or in a manufacturing environment. Those are things that I think we're going to see more of, or even on our mobile device, where it tracks and tells us where we may be, quote, in danger.
Yeah, you might be referencing this question right now because this question did come in. My business is a manufacturing environment, lots of team member motion between work areas. I've seen reports of sensors, wristbands that alert team members when they will get close to one another. What do you think of the viability, effectiveness, and cost value of this type of solution?
The answer depends on how long you think this crisis and those social distancing guidelines are going to be in place. If there's a vaccine, does that eliminate this problem? I don't think it does. Every flu season, we're worried about who's coming in the office and who's sick. So that's not going to go away. Despite the fact that there's a vaccine for the flu every year, we get a little concerned about the flu. And now we're going to be really concerned when that season comes along every year. So I don't have personal experience with those wristbands or watches. I do think it's a very good idea. And I do think anything that's simple technology that we can wear on our person, either in a manufacturing environment, in a social environment, stadium, or in an office environment, I think you're going to see more invention, more technology make its way to allow people to feel a little safer. We're trying to solve for some of those basic human needs. And if we don't solve for those, the effort and energy we're putting forth on some of the higher end needs that companies need to do their best work, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. One thing that struck me about your comment earlier when you answered my question about the working teams is it sounds like a team that could be 5 people this month could be 8 people next month. So does that suggest, just as a general trend, that companies need to use a more kind of modular approach to constructing their office with more kind of flexibility built in?
No doubt. One of the biggest trend that is happening and will continue to happen is the flexibility of the built environment. And so one thing that is constant in most corporations is change. And we have a labor business of a tremendous amount of what the industry calls MACs, moves, adds, and changes. And every week in some of the bigger corporations, we're moving 30 and 40 people a week in and around the same building because of the changes in the nature of their business and a new project, a new business, an acquisition, bringing in an outside team for 6 months to study something. Businesses are more agile, and the spaces they work within need to keep up with the agility, and I think you're going to see more of that.
So speaking of that, pre-COVID-19, there'd been a lot of movement towards hoteling and ensuring that younger workers had a positive work environment and providing the right type of climate for them. So I'm just curious, for those, maybe the few companies on the line that really had not moved in that direction before, how is this an opportunity to reset? And what advice would you have for those companies who are moving from, say, a more static fixed work environment to one that's a little more adaptable?
Don't run, walk. You know, one of the things that's resonated for the last 2 weeks in these client meetings is, gosh, if I knew now what I know then, I would have not planned for all this benching. You know, there was a huge trend in our industry to go to more of this open plan benching, because the knowledge worker doesn't stay at his or her desk all day, forgetting if you're let's say a customer support person who has to answer phones. And so these were touchdown spaces. The problem is, in a maximizing real estate strategy, more people in the same building was just more. It was better, right? And I'm not so sure that it's better anymore. And I'm not so sure, even pre-crisis, that the benching everyone on top of each other was a good long-term solution for people to feel comfortable in the space. What it did was it gave them a place where they could work from, and it increased or decreased the footprint, the real estate footprint, increased the density. But what it also did is it allowed people, or forced people, to work at different places in the building during their different work modes. So that's the good news and the bad news. The short answer to your question is, if you're in a traditional environment today, I would walk, not run, to whatever the new environment is, because your neighbor who committed to a full-blown benching, teaming environment may be very displeased in the next several months and years.
Boy, that is great advice, Steve. Appreciate it. Hey, from your partners here at Optimize, you're the very best at what you do. We really appreciate you, and it's a pleasure to work with your company.
Thank you very much. I enjoy the work we've done with you, and hopefully everyone gains some insights on the call today.
Right. Excellent. Great job, Steve. Appreciate it. To all on the line, we will send you a recording of this session and an invitation for our next session, which will be 4 weeks from today. Be safe, be healthy out there, be kind to one another, and have a great day. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.